Capacity crowd, Butch, my goodness me. They're as good as last week's. Oh, my goodness. Well done, Capacity crowd.
I think they're better. Much better.
Done. Welcome to episode 6 of Life's a Pitch TV. I'm Mark Murphy, and let me introduce you to our team. Terry Butcher's here. Hey! Phil Ham's here. Hey! Russell Osman has got a better offer than us tonight in Australia, hasn't he? Party time for Russ tonight.
Well, it wasn't hard, really, was it?
No. But he'll be back here in the studio very, very soon. And a big thank you to Richard and John and Mark on Technicals, everybody. Hooray! And to those who make it happen, our main sponsor is DPS Tech. Our other sponsors, All About Hearing, marketing company Ginger Pickle, Forward Floors, Come Hither Design, the Hudson Group, Sound 4, Pro Audio, and Venue 16. Give our sponsors a big round of applause. We couldn't do it without them. They keep us going. And if you want to get involved with sponsorship at all, then email us. It's lifesapitch@gmail.com. lifesapitch@gmail.com. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the channel. Let's punch those likes tonight, and also subscribe, please. Is everybody subscribed? Yes. I'm not sure they have. Will you all please subscribe? Yes. Oh, crikey.
Yeah, we'll be going around and checking later.
Yeah, we'll check later.
Terry will be going around and checking
later. And it
later.
does help us to keep the channel going. So please, subscribe if you can. Now, we've got so much to talk about on the show. We had a great one last week, didn't we? Really good with Mickey Stockwell. So many great stories.
I think we were over time, weren't we?
Slightly.
We're added time now, which is a lot.
Yeah,
in football now. So well into added time.
We're just on trend, aren't we, with extra time?
Yeah, very much on trend.
So probably with our guest tonight, maybe extra 13 minutes, I suspect, on the show tonight.
I think there'll be a lot of talking tonight.
I think so. Yeah. I think so. Our special guest coming up in a moment or two, but lots of lovely comments about last week's show. Dangerous Davis got in touch. Fantastic. The first time I've seen this channel, and we'll now go back to watch the first 4 episodes. Mickey Stockwell is my favourite all-time Ipswich player, and it was great to hear the stories of those times. Hello to Voda, who's tuned in Germany. Matt's been in touch. What a fantastic episode. Mick was fantastic and super funny, and so it goes on. But it's time to introduce our special guest this week. It is former Ipswich Town chairman David Sheepshanks is here. And sporting the shirt, David.
Well, we have to, don't we?
Yeah.
And one of ours.
Yes.
Punch brand.
Yeah.
Yep. That's
fantastic. I thought you could have come
with. Don't ask me the year.
I thought you could have come with the blue and white face paint on, like you did in 2001 for Suffolk magazine, wasn't
that fantastic?
Yeah, brilliant, wasn't it?
Yeah. I got that was done for me in the North Stand, sitting in the North Stand. They put it all on. It's quite fun.
Yeah, looked fantastic.
Terry Hunt's crazy idea.
That was great. Well, welcome along. Lots to talk about tonight, and really, really good to see you. I saw you down at Portman Road for the last home game. You enjoying what you're watching at the moment?
Loving it. I mean, I think, like all Ipswich fans, we've been starved a bit for the last, whatever it is, 10, 12 years or something. And, I mean, the Evans era really didn't go right. But the new, Mark Ashen and what he's doing here, Kieran McKenna, I mean, I am so excited. I mean, I'm very envious in a way, because if we'd have had that money in our day, I think things might have been very different. We would have carried on, because they're doing a lot of what we do, but they're doing it even better.
Does it take you back to those days?
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah.
And, cut me in half, I bleed blue and white like all of you. And I live this club. I still do live the club, but I lived this club for 24 years on the board, and then whatever it was, 14 years as chairman. And so it's a long time, and you can't shake it out. I mean, you played for the club for how many years?
Too many.
Not enough in my book. Not enough in my book. I mean, I never forget when you kicked the door down. Was it at West Ham at Upton Park?
It was many places, to be honest. Yes. West Ham was one of them.
But it was when we were relegated.
Norwich as well.
Yeah. Well,
they're a bit late, but they got there in the end, didn't they?
Getting there. Yeah. So anytime we mention Norwich, then feel free to.
No, but I think it's really important to say. I think Kieran McKenna is extraordinary. An inspired choice as manager, and they very kindly had me down for a day at the training ground last season. I spent a day with them, seeing all the things they're doing, I mean, it's just so impressive. And, this is not for the short term. They are building for the long term for the club. Many people ask me, what's a pension company and all that kind of doing, investing in this club? Well, you only have to go and see. I mean, there is no way this is short term. I mean, who knows, one day. But right now, we can only be the beneficiaries. And they are intent. They are on a mission. And Mark's assembled a great team off the field. They've reinvested in the community, because for me, that sort of broke my heart when Marcus Evans closed down the community scheme that we'd spent so many years building up. And, I've actually supported Inspire Suffolk over the years. And but seeing again, they're doing that really well. And I think, calling it a foundation, giving it a new image, giving it a new look, new feel. But just how we did, I remember when I was first appointed chairman in '95, dear old John Kerridge said to me, David, my piece of advice, because I thought he'd be chairman, and he said, no, this is your turn, you've got to do it. Needs a younger man. And he said, my challenge to you is, how do you make Portman Road a place where people want to be again? Because it wasn't a cool place. I mean, we had crowds as low as 7,000 when I first started, and so we came up with a plan. We can go into that later, but it was always measured about how many kids could you see in the streets dressed in blue and white. And they were dressed in green and yellow and whatever. And, when I found out 5 or 6 years ago that Norwich City had a football development officer stationed in Kesgrave High School, I mean, I went apoplectic. And anyway, that same guy now works for us, I think, so happily. But we've come a long way, and now they're doing the same thing. And you can measure now the young kids, they're not all dressed in... Well, we won't talk about the green and yellow colour, but they're not dressed in, Arsenal or West Ham or whatever. They're dressed in blue and white or orange and, Ed Sheeran. I mean, there are so many different component parts of this that are making our club cool again.
It is, absolutely is. And, so many youngsters are wearing those shirts, and record sales of all the shirts flying out. It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I think Mark told me, I can't remember, a huge number anyway, 16,000 shirts of the I probably got the wrong number. That was last season. I mean, it's huge numbers. Now, I think altogether it was something like 50,000 shirts.
I think it was something
50,000,
like
sorry.
Yeah.
I think it was just 16,000 of one of them, whichever one it was. But it's fab. It's really fab. And, and I think all Ipswich Town fans are all back on the bus. And,
clamouring for tickets. If you can't make a game now, you can actually sell your ticket to someone.
You can sell your ticket.
Which you haven't been able to do for ages, have we?
I remember, when we were promoted in 2000, glorious day, we had all the problems. 37,000 people suddenly wanted to go to Wembley, and they all wanted to come to a game. And it was Paul Clouting who came up with a great idea about how to adapt a membership scheme which was based on loyalty. And I don't know whether you remember, people used to have to, if you were lucky, you got 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 home games. But we thought that was really important, because if it was just always the same people coming and anything goes wrong, then they don't. But if you keep a fan base of 35, 40,000 being able to come and see some games, then that gives the connectivity, and people feel the badge in their heart. So, and I mean, I think they're going to have the same problem now, except these guys have got enough money to build bigger stadium, haven't they? I mean, who knows? I mean, they're doing wonderful things with it now, having been left unloved. My dream, actually, before I left, we didn't have the money, was I wanted to put blue AstroTurf all around the outside of the pitch. And it was never put down, and it looked muddier and filthier and more disgusting every season we came in. And now there it is, and it looks so good.
Oh, it's amazing to walk on.
The stadium feels loved again.
Yeah.
Quite apart from what goes on in it. That's what's even more important. But and the pitch. I mean, I know quite a lot about those pitches, because during my days at St George's Park, we put in exactly the same type of pitches. But having a hybrid pitch, undersoil heating, all the irrigation, the whole thing. I mean, it is
a Premier League setup now, on and off the field, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, the only thing, the dangerous thing to say is, one of our friends was saying that, he wondered whether we wouldn't maybe even get promoted this season. I mean, and we might well. The momentum, who knows? You know, nobody's going to bet against it, and God knows we know how hard it is to get there. So if we get there, you want to get there. But I'm slightly nervous of too much success too quick, and you know, the importance of the club building, building from a really solid base. I mean, unquestionably, the financial base is solid, which it wasn't in our day. It never was. Not in the Cobble day, it wasn't. Which is why they ended up selling you.
But yeah, don't tell me about building new stands and everything else. That's a way down. But
yeah,
no, I think if we were to get, and Mark seems to think that we'll finish
I think
in
top
the top two.
Yeah.
If we do that, this club is then well equipped at the moment, even now, to handle the Premier League. Would you say?
Yeah, I think so. I think the club is well equipped. I mean, I have it, you know, etched into my brain, the experiences of 22 years ago. And unquestionably, I don't want to go into all the negative bit, unquestionably, Europe was too much too quick for us. I don't know a single fan who would trade it.
Well, we've still got the flag up behind Phil Ham over here. Look, we're all going on a European tour.
And just what you say, I Helsingborg, Moscow, I remember talking to you on the top of the Duomo in Milan.
Yeah.
All these experiences fans don't forget. And it's a generation like me who didn't have Europe when Terry was playing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think never to be forgotten. And, well, would we trade that for 3 or 4 more years in the Premier League? I'm sure you probably would.
I would, but I understand fans saying they wouldn't, because it was something to treasure, and it was treasured by all of us. I treasured it. I mean, God, I remember some of you being in a bar in Helsingborg. I was
Harry's bar.
I was passed around. God knows how they handled me, because I must have been that heavy.
We've got pictures later, David.
Oh God!
Yeah, the famous Harry's bar.
But it was just such a memorable day, and then I mean, I remember it was the Helsingborg game at home, actually. We drew 0-0 the first leg, when Lennart Johansson, who was the president of UEFA, came to open the stand. Do you remember?
He's a Town fan, isn't he, I think?
Well,
if I remember rightly.
I maybe made him, I don't know, but he was a really special man. I'm not sure he's still with us, but he was a wonderful man. And, having that kind of support, if you like. I mean, he accepted the offer to come, the request to come. And then Milan, oh my God. I mean, you get me memories going, standing in Place Duomo in Milan. And, I love the Suffolk humour, don't you? It's always distilled down to something really simple and practical. And an old boy came over to me, said, they always call me David. He said, David, good to see you. And we're standing in the Place Duomo. There must have been 4,000 or 5,000 Ipswich fans in there. It was just sensational. Anyway, he said, you see that light on the top of that spire, boy? I said, yes. He said, how do you reckon they changed that light bulb? and so moments like that, they're to be treasured, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, that trip was incredible. I took my old BBC Radio Suffolk breakfast show to Milan to broadcast both days, day of the match, day after, and 10,000 fans, and so many memories, so many stories from that time. But we'll perhaps come to that a little bit later on. But you've got a long association with Ipswich Town. So can you remember your first visit to Portman Road?
Yeah, vividly. It was April 66. 65-66 season, home to Leyton Orient. Andy Nelson, who had been our captain in Ramsey's championship team, was captain of Leyton Orient. And the only survivors of our great team were Billy Baxter, who was centre half, he wasn't our captain, he became the captain, and Ray Crawford. And the rest of the team I can pretty much remember, but somebody's going to go and check the programmes and tell me I've got it wrong.
Yeah, well, Phil Ham's over there with his laptop.
But Ken Hancock was in goal. I think it was a guy called Joe Davin at right back, and Mick McNeil was at left back. I think Dave Harper was right half, as they call it. Billy Baxter in the middle. Cyril Lee was the captain. And then one of my favourite players of that year, Danny Hegan, was sort of right midfield. Frank Brogan was left wing. And And then there was Jerry Baker, who was Joe Baker's brother. He was centre striker alongside Crawford, I think. And I'm just struggling for who the other one was. It Tracy? I'm trying to remember who the other guy was. Coleraine?
I've got Hancock, Bolton,
yeah,
McNeil,
Jack Bolton, McNeil, yeah, okay.
Dave Harper, Billy Baxter, Cyril Lee, Eddie Spirit, Danny Hegan. Who anybody you speak to who's about 10 years older than me, Danny Hegan was their favourite player.
Yeah.
That's my. You can tell us a bit about him in a minute. Ray Crawford, Jerry Baker, and Frank Brogan. Yeah.
So nearly right. Anyway.
Not far.
So where were you then?
Off.
What can you remember? What stand you were in? Did
I
you go with family? Or?
I went with 3 guys who work for my father, and I live out the other side of Woodbridge. I'm a Suffolk boy, and formed up. They were regular fans, and they said to me one day, "Did I want to go?" And they formed up to my father, who was very military and rather strict and had no interest in football at all. Said, "Could we take David to the football?" I mean, I wasn't that young. I was 11 at that, and 12. Anyway, so I went, and we stood in underneath the chicken run. So that's what it was called in those days. It was the old. The stand went to the speedway, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Yeah.
And but we stood, I don't know, 2/3 of the way along, and watched the game, and we won 3-2. You're going to ask me who scored now? I can't remember.
I can
test Phil Ham out. But that hooked you as a young lad. Then that was it, was it?
You know, and it stayed with me forever. So when I was, it was my turn. How you engage the community, how you engage the schools, how you draw everybody in. I would just say it only takes one game. It only takes one game. That's all it took with me anyway. And but one game for a young kid, they hooked. I mean, more often than not. Anyway,
it's a bit like Bobby Robson when he always says when you climb the steps, as a young boy with your father, and you then get to the top, and then you come down into the stadium and you see the pitch before the game, obviously, and you see everything, you fall in love with it, even before a ball has been kicked. Yeah. You just fall in love with it. Yeah. And I'm sure many people here have had the same thing. They could possibly recount their first experience of going to Portman Road. So they are special moments, aren't they?
They are, but excuse me, and that's the importance of getting kids there. And that's, again, I really applaud what Mark's doing, and Dan Palfrey and all the guys in the foundation to try and really get into the schools. Because the more schools, the more kids you get engaged, the more people excited. That'll be the future. Let's
talk about the Robson years. We all remember what a successful period that was. Butch, your era there at Portman Road. What are your thoughts when you look back at that now, David? Because he built team after team after team, didn't he, with so few signings?
Yeah. Well, more's the pity in a way, because if we had 1 or 2 more, we'd have probably won the league. But that's no criticism of him. I don't mean that, and there wasn't the money anyway. I mean, he was a maestro. I mean, Terry's much better place to talk about him than me. But I got to know him. I was a fan. I was a season ticket holder, during his era, most of it. I wasn't even a season ticket holder to begin with. And then I got season tickets, and then eventually I joined the board, just literally as Terry had left. And so...
I actually heard you were coming on. That's why I
left. Anyway, but that was...
That's not true, by the way. That's not true.
But more was the pity, really. But those last few years... I'll come back to Bobby Robson, but those last few years of life in the old First Division, when Terry was still there. So I was just looking at it today. So, we were in Europe 9 years out of 10, for goodness sake. And if there'd been a Champions League, we'd have been in it something like 6 years. People don't believe you when you tell them that nowadays. And but that after Bobby went, I mean, it was such a massive shoes to fill for Bobby Ferguson, who was a really, really good coach. I mean, and and a pretty good manager. And but he held on as best as he could. But the board... I think they'd spent all the money building what was called the Pioneer Stand then, and I don't know what else, but they never had the money. And so when the success began to desert us, we were second 2 years running, 81, 82, 82, 83. And then yeah, is that right? I think it's right.
81.
81, 82. Then Bobby left, and then Bobby Ferguson is in post, and I think the first season he finished 9th. and the second season he finished 12th. But during that time, Paul Mariner, Alan Brazil, Franz Tyson, Arnold Muren, Russell Osman, Mick Mills, George. Well, George left 85. I remember that vividly. But yeah, they all left. And then this man was the last one to go. And Paul Cooper and Aaron Gatesy stayed.
I think Gatesy left as well.
Yeah, but he was there when I joined the board, actually, still. Just, yeah.
What was that
But
like
I mean,
for
it was
you, Butch,
amazing,
actually?
but they've all gone. It was, now, poor old, I say poor old, but I mean, Bobby Ferguson actually did a really pretty damn good job, with in those sort of conditions. And then I joined the board, and within a few months of joining the board, the decision was made by the board, and I was one of them, but it was, obviously this was Patrick Cobbold and the other more senior directors. They'd all decided that the club wasn't going to go forward under Bobby Ferguson, which I think was, looking back on it, was a pretty harsh call. Because, I mean, Bobby might well, had he had a bit more funds, a bit more support, and you look at some of the players that he signed, and I think I was trying to think, what was his name? Kevin Wilson, fantastic striker. I mean, he signed some really good players, but it wasn't enough to keep us up.
When you're losing top internationals like that, for our squad, and they're not replacing them with top internationals, then obviously the standard is going to drop, which it did. But they kept going. But the thing is, with time, when Bobby Ferguson left, it then regrouped, and then eventually after who was it?
John Duncan came for 4 years.
After John.
Then John Lyle.
And then John Lyle came, and that was a completely different thing. And then obviously the club got promotion after that.
So you were on the board when John Lyle came in?
Yeah. I was on the board.
That promotion.
Yeah. I was on the board all the way through John Duncan. Got to know him very well, and I was the young director.
What was that like, David? Because there were quite a lot of older gentlemen directors at that point. You were the young pup coming in, weren't you?
I love being called a young pup. God, I wish I was a young.
It says here. You asked me to mention that.
I wish I was a young pup now. Anyway, I mean, look, being made a director of the club was just the biggest honour you could ever have, and I was utterly devoted to the club. And how I became a director was actually I wrote to Patrick Cobbold, who I didn't know, but my family sort of knew him, and he was 20 years older. And I wrote to him saying, I mean, basically, politely saying that I thought the PR stank because there was no PR. And all you ever heard was, you just heard that this player or that player was being sold or going. And there was nothing, there was no sort of promotional side of the club. Nobody sent any messages, look, this is the future, this is what we're planning, stay with us, this is what we're doing, we're going to invest in youth or whatever it was. There was nothing. A complete vacuum. And so I felt sort of really passionate about this. And so I wrote to Patrick. Of course, I never got a reply. And then about 3 or 4 months later, that was literally when Terry was sold that summer, 86. Because you went to Rangers in the end, didn't you? It was Tottenham or Rangers or something. Anyway, you went to Rangers. And that was the last straw for me. So I wrote this letter. And 6 months later, 5 months later, whatever it is, doesn't matter, January, I got a call. January 87. I got a call saying, from Patrick, personal call, who I'd never spoken to that I'd remembered, would you like to come to lunch as a guest of the board for the game? And it was against Portsmouth, and we lost it 1-0. I remember that. But anyway, I went to the game, and not quite knowing. I mean, nobody had said anything about what it was or, so on. But I was on my best sort of behaviour, and I didn't realise I was being interviewed. And throughout lunch, it was only the Ipswich board. There were no visiting directors because Patrick, they'd just been relegated, and they didn't like some of the visiting boards.
Did you have any food or just wine like they normally have?
Mainly liquid. So my what I later discovered was that my interview consisted of how much did I love the club, and hopefully that shone through. How much did I know about the club, love the club, passionate about the club. How many disgusting stories could I tell?
how many are you prepared to share tonight?
And how much liquid how much alcoholic beverage could I ingest?
Good. It sounds very good to me. I enjoy that.
And anyway, apparently I passed, because 10 days later I got a call from Patrick saying, you're the unanimous choice of the board to become a director. And I was half the age of some of them. And so that 9 years actually doesn't happen anymore, was a wonderful period, really, because it was, in some ways, I look back on it, it was kind of like my induction to being a chairman eventually, because I learnt all the ropes of the club, met all the personalities, met some of you and many of the fans, went on supporter buses up and down, which I carried on doing a bit when I was chairman, but not as much, but went on supporter buses all over the country, and with the wonderful Irene Davey and John Catton and what was her name, June Stroud. I'm trying to think of all the names anyway, and made friends, but got to understand, what mattered, and that really stood me in great stead when I did finally get sort of the nod that I was to take over.
How did that come about? How did the chairmanship come about?
Well, we're sort of drifting over history. I will come back to Bobby Robson, by the way. I must do that. But after the period, John Duncan, which he never really failed, but he never succeeded, and the fans got really upset about this style of play. I'm not sure it was ever that bad, but anyway, we didn't get in the playoffs for 4 years. John Lyall got appointed. First year, John Lyall was a bitter man. He was a really, bitter man about his sacking from West Ham. And he had a point to prove. And so it was a very inspired decision when we appointed him. And you want somebody with that in them. And the first season we did nothing. We finished 12th, I think, with him. And then the second season we ran away with it. We were champions. And we were promoted at Oxford, I never forget it, against Jim Magilton. He never lets me forget that either. And it was a funny story. John Kerr was chairman by then. And he was driving around the country with a case of champagne in his car, hoping we were going to be promoted. But he had to take it home again from Brighton, I think, or wherever it was. But finally at Oxford, it was all good. But John, what happened then? I mean, it was a brilliant achievement, because he he signed Steve Whitten and Paul Goddard, two people he'd had at West Ham, and that was all, actually. And, Steve Whitten was a big, tall guy, centre forward really, but he converted him into a winger. So he beat his man. They put high balls out to the side. He beat his man every time and cut in and scored a lot of goals. Paul Goddard, Sarge, all about. And we ran away with the league. But the sadness is that having done that, John kind of he handed the reins to Mick McGivern, Superman, lovely man. But Mick was a number two in the nicest possible way, and he did his best, but John was no longer really motivated after that. I mean, he'd proved to the world that he was, it was wrong to sack him.
That he wasn't a one-trick pony.
He wasn't a one-trick pony. But I don't know what you all feel, but I felt it was really sad, because actually it got worse over a period of 2 years. I'm going too quick. So
do you feel that that the change, because obviously the change was ultimately made in just before Christmas '94, wasn't it? And do you think that change should have been made earlier then?
It wasn't my call, and I was a member of the board that didn't do it. So I'm not going to say. And John Kerr was a really good chairman, and but it was a very unhappy time in the club, if you remember. And Patrick Cobbold's own nephew Ivan led a rebellion against the board, and there was an EGM, and it was very highly charged, and it wasn't a good time at all. And the board carried the EGM overwhelmingly, so that all went away. But I think it took its toll on John Kerr, and a few months later he decided he was going to step down. That's basically what happened. And of course it coincided with us being relegated, and George did really well in as best as he could, having been given a pretty short straw when he was made manager. But And I mean, I always brag to everybody about how I was in the ground when I saw us beat Man United 6-0 and missed 2 penalties, or 3 if you count one twice taken. Twice taken. It was only Walkie was on compassionate leave, wasn't he, or something?
His father had died, I think.
His father had died, something like that.
If he'd been there, it would have been 9. So, yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And but I always have to even it up by saying I was also there when they beat us 9-0.
But the appointment of George was just before you became chairman, wasn't it? But you must have been involved in that appointment.
I was involved in the appointment, but it was John Kerr's lead.
But what an appointment!
Yeah, because the 2 final interviews were George or Howard Kendall, and that's public record, I know. So maybe some of you might have forgotten, but Howard Kendall was clearly a legend in the game and a great guy. But in the interview, I always try to say to people, unless you're in the interview yourself, you don't know what's going on. It's kind of like people were saying to me, somebody said to me, well, why is he bringing Caden Jackson on and not Ladapo the other day? I just said, well, I'll tell you why, because he's on the training ground and we're not. And he knows the right person for this situation and how well Caden Jackson's training or whatever. And wasn't he right? So same thing. You don't know what goes on in an interview unless you're actually in the room. Excuse me. And George won that job hands down. I can't only explain that. It's not dissimilar, actually, to how we ended up choosing, much to everybody's surprise, Jim Magilton. And I won't say, because I don't think it is a matter of public record, who the others were in that interview.
You're saving that for the book?
It'll be in the book. It's anyway.
There is a book, isn't there? On the way?
There is a book.
There is a book. You come back when you've got the book out, will you?
There is a book. But I think again. I mean, all I will say is, and this Jim does know, is that when the interviews happened, I mean, Jim asked to be interviewed, and obviously we did everything as a board, so it wasn't just my call. We talked about it and agreed that he could be on the long list, and he did very, very well. And he forced himself onto the short list. And but when it came to the final interviews, and the other 2 people were highly credible people in the game, and I was pretty convinced that we were appointing somebody else. From the first interviews, I was pretty sure we were going in another direction. And obviously my view would have counted a bit in the room. I mean, although we did this democratically as a board, and we met secretly in Roger Finbow's offices in London, and I can say that now because he's no longer in his offices, so therefore nobody's going there. And but when Jim came in, he absolutely blew the thing away because he knew everything. He knew everything that the club needed to do. He knew all of the things that needed changing. He knew all of the things and the players, and who were the people to build on, who were the people to move out, all that kind of stuff. And so unless you're in the room, you don't know that, And it was overwhelming, by the way. When it happened, the board were unanimous. And it was a big board by then. I think there were 9 or 10 of us on the board, and Holly and Simon and many others. And it was a. So yeah, I think it's important to always give people credit. They might make a wrong decision, but what goes on in the room, we can only speculate.
Okay, we've got a lot to get through.
I think it is on public record. I think it's Nigel Pearson was the other manager. We asked him about it and he was quite happy to talk about it. That it was
Don't push it, Phil. Don't push it.
Wait for the book. We've got lots to get through tonight. I want to quickly talk to you about. We're going to go back to Bobby Robson, but George, the playoff final. Who was at Wembley? You're still here, capacity crowd. Excellent. One of the questions later on, and I'll mention it now, was what went through your mind at the final whistle at Wembley Stadium? Because that, for so many fans, including you, was just an incredible moment, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, what went through my mind? I mean, nirvana, heaven, relief, bloody hell, probably worse words than that. We've made it. There was a picture of me on a video I've seen, watched back, a highlight thing, and it focuses on me, and I look absolutely racked with tension, like sort of like that. And so and I was shaking. I mean, in the game, every game we all kick every ball, don't we, and all that. And I was very calm before the match, but when the game happened, I mean, I can replay a lot of it. I won't bore you all, but it's sort of, and that moment, I've seen it afterwards. So Peter Drury is thank you so much, Terry, became a good friend, the ITV commentator. You'd know him. He's a Watford fan, I think, and Terry Baxter did a famous commentary as well, and that was very good on radio. But Peter Drury's, it goes something like Rooster Premiership, and every time I think of that or hear it now, the hairs go up on the back of my neck.
Did you think before, because there's been like 3 playoffs before that, did you think then, of getting to the final of the final playoff game, did you ever think that we're doomed, we're never going to make it?
No, I didn't. And that's not meant to sound, the way it might come across. I really had belief, and I mean, nowadays people have 3-year, 5-year plans to a penny. I'm not sure there were many around when we did it, and when I did get made chairman, again, I had pent up in me all of the things that needed to happen, not just what John Kerridge advised, but how we had to invest in the community, how we had to invest in the academy, how we had to I think I used the expression, bring the loving feeding back to Portman Road, all those different things, how we had to have joined up thinking in terms of kids' prices, family prices, all that kind of thing, how we made it accessible. And and I'd set that plan out and gone to the board with it, and then went public, which they were very against, actually. I said, no, I'm going to make myself accountable, because it's much better we put a plan out there and we then try and live up to it. And every year, Terry, you are, thank you for raising it, but this is fact. I can't remember who all the personalities were. I mean, obviously it was Brian Knight, the old Knightsey, but there were other people who would come up to me, and I can't do this, but, put the microphone there and say, well, David, that's done, isn't it? We've lost in the playoffs, and you're going to have to sell your best players. You've already said you're going to have to sell your best players. So, so we might as well pack up and go. And all this, belief for the fans that we're going to get promoted, we can forget that, can't we? I had to say, because the leader, people watch the leader. I mean, robustly, absolutely not. I'm hurting tonight. This is after all those ghastly nights, losing to Bolton, losing to Sheffield, all these things. But I'm hurting tonight as much as everybody else is, if not more. But won't be more, but the same. And we all are. But we have a plan, and we have a good young manager. We have a great setup, and we will go again. We will learn from this, and we will buy. We will sell because we almost certainly have to. But we will buy again, and we will get stronger. Well, that's impossible. Well, I'm sorry. You might think it's impossible. You can leave it to us to try and prove it. Whatever. Next year, same thing again. And then the hardest one was when Kieran Dyer equalised in the very last minute. Do you remember? And we lost on away goals. And I was on the Football League board then, and I moved that the rule be changed because it was unfair that a team who finished 6th in that situation had 30 minutes longer to score an away goal. And so, anyway, that did get changed. But then finally, so Terry, no. I mean, every year I knew that I had to stay with it or stay with the plan. If I don't believe in my own plan, then who else is going to? And many people didn't for a while. But eventually, we were proved right. And Kieran, bless his heart, well, Bobby Robson, was the one who sanctioned the transfer, and they paid $6.5 million for him. And that $6.5 million was a godsend. And you all know the rest. With it, we bought Marcus for $2.5. Still can't believe how Huddersfield sold him, but because they were strapped for cash.
We were nip and tuck, weren't we? At the
time, we
time?
were nip and tuck, and we got Jermaine Wright, and we got John McGreal, and we got Crofty, and we got
Martin Roycer later on in the season.
And Martin came on loan though. We only bought him when we were promoted. We paid $1 million for him, but that was proof in the pudding. So you do have to sell sometimes. You've got to sell a great player, but with the money, you can buy better players.
But you have to have confidence in your manager to pick up the players.
And I had complete confidence in George. He was an inspired selector of players. He had, he had great judgment. And so I think, we always discussed it. He was put through the hoops, so he'd have to discuss it with me. He'd then have to discuss it with the whole board. So the whole board would hear what George's rationale was. And, invariably we backed him. And, but, there were also some horrible days in that. I mean, the worst day was selling Maurizio Taricco, who was one of my favourite players, let alone everybody else's favourite player.
He really wanted to play for Town.
And he really wanted to play for Town. And I can remember him going to the place that you all want to boo. And we lost up there 1-0. And I saw him standing outside the coach. And I said, Maurizio, come on, we've got to move on. We've got to look forward, not back. No, Mr. Chairman, no. I just want to kill somebody.
It's very good, that.
That's great, fantastic. I'm quite frightened now. David, we're going to take a break from our questioning. We've got some questions from our capacity crowd and from our socials. But for now, give David a big round of applause. Let's remember those fantastic days for that. It is time on the show for our regular feature. It's now sponsored by Ginger Pickle, the marketing company. It's time for our Keep It Up Challenge. Right, okay. Now, David, do you want to have a go at the Keep It Up Challenge? I said I'd give you the chance.
I'll watch you.
Okay.
Yes. Hey!
So,
Yay!
before the evening started, Terry Butcher and I drew lots as to see who was going to do the Keep It Up Challenge this week. And guess who won? Anybody? No, me.
Hey!
So, here is the football. And I've had so many people say, it's time you had a go, Murph. Butch, you're going to do the 60-second timer?
Yes.
Phil, I presume you've got the whistle.
The Acme Thunderer.
Yeah.
What do you mean, cheeky so-and-sos? And capacity crowd, are you going to count?
Did you say 6 seconds?
6 seconds, was it?
4 second Phil.
Count should you require.
4 second
should you
Phil,
need to.
and I think 6 is what I've got to beat.
To beat me, 59 to beat Luke Chambers.
No, I only want to about you. And I'll certainly beat Cole Scoos and George Burley, and now David Sheepshanks, so they're all 0. So I think I deserve a big round of applause.
Do you want to bask in this for a couple of seconds?
One Mark Murphy! There's only one Mark Murphy!
Okay, enough!
Murphy! Yep.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Well done.
That's a lifetime best, isn't it? Lifetime best. Well done.
To beat Phil Ham, double figures! Oh my goodness! Oh, I'm knackered now. Fantastic. Phil, time for some news in brief.
Right, okay, I'll find that page then. Hang on.
You had one job to do tonight.
Well, obviously the big news, signing Brandon Williams on loan from Manchester United today. What's everyone's thoughts on that?
Well, Greg Lee going to Oxford is, I guess, part of this, and I'm disappointed that he's going, actually, and I think our capacity crowd is nodding here. I really like Greg Lee when I've seen him. He's a great singer. He's great at the end of season party, but I will really miss him. What do you think, Terry, David, on that? Because he's not really had a chance because of Leaf, but he's always been there as backup.
Yeah. Go on.
No, I like him a lot. Whenever I've seen him play, I've always thought he's absolutely super. But and I also saw him singing at the end of season party. But yeah, I mean, he's not going to get a look in. I mean, Leif Davis, I think, is exceptional, and I know some fans worry about whether he would be snapped up by a Premier League club because he's that good, I think. And I thought he was sort of man of the match against Stoke. I mean, I know lots of people were man of the match, but he was exceptional. And so I think, I can understand. I mean, in Kieran I trust. I think, Kieran knows Brandon Williams. He coached him when I think he was in the academy when Kieran was at Man United. And he will know this player. He'll know everything about him, and he'll know what he can do. So I feel 100% certain that it's a sad move when somebody goes, but he wouldn't be doing this unless he was getting somebody even better.
Well, he needs to play first team football on a regular basis, not just coming on for 2 or 3 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. So I can understand that he wants to go. I can understand the club releasing him. I can certainly understand Kieran McKenna's logic, and I can't understand that we've signed an ex-Norwich player. But having said that,
you're warming up now. Well
having
done.
said that, he was really an Ipswich agent at Norwich because he played in the season that they went down from the Premier League. And,
excellent.
And that also fell out with the fans as well.
Yeah.
So he's right up our street. Good signing.
Yeah, I think he was playing in the Man United first team at 19, I think. So clearly he's a very talented player. He strikes me as a player who's kind of lost his way a bit in the last few years. Obviously, a spell at Norwich would do that to anyone.
Is there a cheer for Norwich then? It was, wasn't there?
Sort of a bit like some of the signings that Joe Royle made actually, and Mick McCarthy. That players who've perhaps fallen away a little bit and sort of come back to us to reinvigorate them. Dave McGoldrick being an example, perhaps under Mick McCarthy. I think a very promising signing.
But he can play on both sides.
Yes,
left back and right back,
and he's a right-footed left back, like Mick Mills, Mauricio Taricco. There you go. So there's a pathway there, isn't there? Hladky, team of the week last week after his performance. Are we going to have a battle for the number 1 shirt when Christian Walton gets fit?
Yep.
Nothing wrong with that.
No,
it's
excellent.
And Kieran Slicker looked good against Bristol, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He did. I think for a young lad. But yeah, I think Václav Hladky has been excellent.
Do you think it's going to be the thing for Kieran McKenna this year? Not about tactics or anything else like that, but it's team selection, because he's got more headaches this season than he had last season in terms of players that want to step up to the Championship and want to impress, because they know if they do well in the Championship, they've got a really good chance of getting bought by Premier League clubs.
And fewer games to play them in as well, because last season we obviously had League One games, but players weren't playing. We're playing in the Papa Johns, and I think keeping the squad happy is going to be quite a tough job. Corrie Dabba and Kilmarnock beating Celtic 1-0.
Get in there. Get in there.
That's one for you. He's done very well. They've beaten Celtic and Rangers.
I'm not happy with the Rangers one, but obviously the Celtic one, I'm delighted.
But he's a player who played for you, isn't he? He is.
Left-footed centre-back, very, very quick, not like me at all. But he's got good potential, and he's made a lot of games out on loan, so he's got a lot of experience. And if you're going to play in lower leagues especially, I'm not saying Scotland's a lower league, but he's played before in lower leagues, and it's tough and it's hard, and that's what he needed. So hopefully he'll come back to town a much better player.
And finally, the Tractor Girls, 102nd minute winner in their opening fixture at Cardiff, 2-1.
Well on the Tractor Girls.
Well done. Great
Fantastic.
Start to the season.
Right on the Tractor Girls. Questions from our socials for you, David. Can you ask David, does he remember in the 90s when Town were on tour in Sweden? He invited me and my friend Rob to have dinner with the players after the Town had just played a pre-season friendly. A lovely gesture. That's from Phil in Clacton.
Wow. I'm glad I did.
Well, it's made his moment.
Those tours were they were really wonderful. We went through the John Duncan, John Lyle era in particular. We went to northern Finland or northern Sweden every year. And actually, I remember there were many great things that happened. I think I can tell you. But I remember Maurizio Taricco making it on one of those tours. Do you remember we'd bought him the year before and he played one game and he was clearly not up to it? Do you remember vaguely?
Yeah, he played Bolton in the
it was a cup game, and he got roasted really. And then Adrian Paz played almost immediately, but Maurizio didn't for the whole season. And we went on pre-season tour that next whatever it was, July rather. And Mickey Stockwell, somebody got injured at fullback, and Maurizio got in, and he never looked back.
Yeah, amazing.
And that was it. So, I mean, they were great tours, but they were wonderful times because a few supporters used to come, and it was just such a happy thing to do because you could get those supporters who did come up, those guys from Clacton, could get close to the players and close to all of us.
Well, we've got photographic evidence. I think
Okay, come on,
behind us, flashing up on our screen, is a picture, David, of you along with Carl Fuller. Hope all is well, he says.
It was Carl.
Yeah, please can you ask David about his visit to Harry's Bar in Helsingborg in 2001 to meet supporters before the game.
Yeah.
What are his memories from that day? And here I am pictured with him. It's Carl on the right, and there you are in there somewhere. So what was that? Can you remember that, Harry's Bar?
I do remember. Well, that was the bar we were talking about.
Yeah.
That's where I went into a bar. I've never been. It was sort of what you imagine one of these Munich beer houses or whatever looks like. It was vast. I don't know if any of you were there. And it was a huge bar. I mean, there must have been, I don't want to exaggerate, at least, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 800 people in it. It was absolutely rammed.
Absolutely chocker. People outside as well, wasn't it?
And people outside. And I went in, and people saw me, and then I got picked up. And I was literally passed around on everybody's shoulders. I mean, talk about health and safety. Anyway, I just, you go with the flow.
You do indeed, yeah.
And hope you're not dropped.
George has been in touch. Do you have Heinz or Stoke sauces on your breakfast?
Well, only Stokes.
Okay. Well, that's
we
your brother's company,
we love
isn't it?
Stokes
Yeah.
because my brother and I had Suffolk Foods together, and for many, many years. And then when we sold it in 2004, when I was so immersed in football, he founded Stokes. But some of the recipes aren't dissimilar, and so no, of course I eat his mayonnaise, his ketchup, best ketchup, best onion marmalade, best chili jam.
Do you know what?
Anyway.
The difference between interviewing you here tonight and when I was on the BBC, I would have had to stop you about 5 minutes ago on that. So buy Stoke sauces, everybody.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about that
a new
anymore.
sponsor for the show. There you go.
Well, there, I'll tell him.
Yeah, Ben's
He
for life.
doesn't do football really, but I'll try.
Ben's for life's been in touch. Who was your favourite town signing whilst you were there?
Oh my God.
Who was the one that really kind of... Finidi George? Matteo Serini, David?
No.
Okay. I'm just throwing some names out.
They might be at the other end of the scale. Oh my goodness me. Favourite signing. I mean, there are so many most profound.
One that
I'm going to say Matty Holland.
Okay.
Because when Matt came, that was another example, by the way. We didn't really have the money, but I'm trying to think who we'd sold. I think we'd sold Klaus Thompson, and I might have got my years wrong, but Phil, you'll help me.
Matthew, maybe around that time?
Huh?
I don't know. Alex Matthew, was that?
No,
a bit
Alex
later?
Matthew came.
No. Yes, you
Alex Matthew, he didn't go for a lot of
you're
money
probably
either.
right. Probably was.
But I love
was,
Alex Matthew,
Thompson.
by the way, is right up there. He's one of my favourite ever players. Lovely man, pretty good commentator actually, isn't he?
Yeah.
But
Matt was a
Matt,
great signing.
Matt, we had to find the money, and we really did have to find the money, and it was a protracted negotiation. I think we paid 775,000 or something for him, something like that, and it was spread over a bit of time to make it affordable for us. But it was an era changing signing, because he really became George's man on the pitch, and he was a captain fantastic, bit like this man. Actually, we never had one after you left until I mean, there were other good captains, Dave Linnigan and other, but Matt was in your vein. He was wholehearted. He gave everything. I don't think he missed a single match. Not a single match. Certainly up to the end of the first season in the Premier League. Not one game.
I think he missed one match because of.
And I mean, it's,
when we started to rotate, I think it was the first time he'd missed a game since he joined the club, or something like that.
Yeah.
200 and something. I think it might have been
Extraordinary.
exactly 200 or something like that.
Fantastic guy.
And epitomised the approach to the transfer market as well,
It
didn't he?
did.
Buying a player from the lower leagues like that
It did.
and bringing him on. Yeah.
It did. I think there were I won't go on, but there were many others. David Johnson was a pretty important. I mean, there was a great David Johnson before, of course, in your era, and I loved him. He was Jonty's Jonty's shop.
Yeah.
But bless him, he's left us, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Sadly,
Yeah, very sad.
But
We've got time. Do you know, I
Go
knew
on.
we'd have extra time
Keep
tonight.
going.
Keep going. We've got some questions. I think Steve, you're going to ask a question. Do you want to go over to the microphone there? Steve's come all the way from North America. Everybody.
well done, Steve.
Go on, Steve. What's your question?
Hi, David.
Hi,
it's
Steve.
not really a question so much. You mentioned Milan earlier and going on the buses, going on the coaches. My brother-in-law and I were in Milan that night, and we met you because you came onto our coach. And I think that really showed us as supporters what a great chairman you were. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
And
There's a challenge as well.
and
that
there
you've
is
been
a
set.
little challenge. I was hoping to bring a scarf, and by the way, I love the placement.
The ITFC North American
Yeah.
Supporters
Yeah.
Club scarf
I
is
was-
now at BT's bar. Yep.
It is, yeah. I was going to bring a scarf, but PZ beat me to it. So I've bought a sticker, and I would like to put it.
What is your challenge then, Steve?
Well, the challenge is to put it on the laptop of Phil Ham.
okay.
Yeah, you can, by all
So-
means, yeah.
Would you
So
like to
cover up one of
I'm
surreptitiously
going
walk
to-
over there and do that
Absolutely,
so that you can,
yes, I'll do that now.
off you go. There he
You
goes.
can actually put it on Phil's head because there's
Yeah, put
plenty
it
of
on
room
Phil's
there.
head. There he is. And he
while-
has.
Oh, well done. And while you,
Thank you very much.
thank you very, thank you very much for saying what you said and sharing that. That's really generous of you. And just while you're doing, I sent a note to Mark. Literally, coincidentally, a couple of weeks ago, I got an email from a guy called Leo Chandiok, who was the chairman of the Australian Supporters Club. And when I was in Australia in 2001, I went and met him. And so he sent me this email with a photograph of him and I together. And he's coming over in a month's time.
And we're going to get him on the show.
And, you say...
You say you went on the bus. Did you pay?
We've actually got Henning here as well from Norway. Give us a wave. One of our Norwegian fans here.
Henning.
Henning's all the way from Norway. And I think we've got another question, haven't we? Do you want to come to the microphone? Yeah, we've got another question here.
Hi, David.
Hi.
Great job you done at Ipswich. I'd just like to know if you had a real biggest regret.
Yeah, it'll be pretty easy, really. I mean, falling out of the Premier League on the second year, that was the hardest thing ever because it was everything that we swore would never happen. And I was just, funnily enough, looking at it to get again today as I've been doing my book all day. And you can't believe it, really. We were bottom of the league until Christmas. We only won one match in that second season until we beat Tottenham, and then we did the double over them. And we then won 8 out of the next 10 games. And after that, we got thumped 6-0 by Liverpool at home, who'd thumped Leeds 4-0 the week before. And then we had no game for 4 weeks. But we still had 12 games left. And in those 12 games, we won 1, drew 3, lost 8. So it was a really hard one to take. And when I was talking earlier about, careful, I didn't say those words, but careful what you wish for. I think at the time we weren't, we were absolutely ready to stay in the Premier League. I will, maintain. And we didn't ever think we could do 5th again. We thought might do 12th, I think we budgeted. We thought that was a sort of sensible thing to do. And, but being in Europe was such a distraction. It was a distraction because we ended up buying more players than we would have otherwise done, like Fanidi and Matteo and so on. The view was we could never play in Europe unless you had a bigger squad. Secondly, those guys coming in created a fracture in the dressing room because there was a we and they were paid more and all that kind of stuff. And also it was a distraction. We won 3 games in Europe. We drew 2 and lost 1 away in Milan. But 3, that would have been 11 points. If that form had been in the Premier League on the pitch, we'd have been mid-table. We'd have been fine. And so, I know you can say ifs and buts, but I do honestly think that Europe, while it was a joy, was such a massive distraction, and it affected everybody in the club. So my big regret, yes, I think my big regret is that we went down after 2 years, and we know what the consequences were. So that's my biggest
Financially
regret.
after that.
And
I
that-
can never, and I then took public ownership of trying to put it right, which I think we did. Unfortunately, Marcus Evans, in the end, it took 5 years to find him, by the way, but he did put money in, just didn't work out quite the way we'd all hoped.
What do you think about the Marcus Evans then? Him coming, I think at the time when he came in, he had the finance that was big enough to compete at the top of that the championship as it is now. But gradually the division got richer and richer, and either he didn't have the money or he wasn't willing to put the money in.
Yeah. And we'll never know the answer to that question. But he clearly did have the money in the beginning, and he convinced us. And I mean, he didn't just have to convince me, he had to convince the whole board. You know, we were very reluctant sellers. We didn't have to sell that day, but there wasn't exactly a queue, and there wasn't a Mark Ashton or a Game Changers or anything queuing up to do it. We tried everything. I tried all the rich people that we knew. We did share issues and we did all those things, but there was nobody else. And actually, I had to work quite hard to convince Marcus to go with us. And
I think he tried a bit too hard, didn't he?
But
he did, and I think he put 80 million in the first 2 years.
He kept us
something like
afloat
that.
and kept us going all those years. And he's done a good sell-on, actually. Did a really good sell-on.
So that's right. We've got to finish on a high because Phil's just dropped us.
Well, no, I was going to say that it's worth remembering that period after administration, and I think administration was largely factors outside the club. The fact that Derby and Leicester ended up in a similar position, didn't they?
Yeah, ITV Digital went bust.
Yeah, it was a perfect storm in many respects. Yeah,
it was awful.
But then the period afterwards, the club was under Joe Royal. It was a good time. Punching above its weight very significantly, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was.
It was an amazing time. It
Shefke,
really was.
I'll always blame. I can't be careful what I say. Well, there was a certain Norwich player, former Norwich player, who clashed, let's say accidentally, with Shefke Kuchi when playing, I think, for Coventry against us in early March 2005 or 6, which were 5.
5, I think. Yeah.
And we were top of the table, and Shefke and Darren Bent were scoring goals for fun. And I was convinced this was sort of almost our redemption. We were going to get promoted, and after all the nightmare of the previous couple of years, we were going to be back. And then Shefke got this injury, and he was never the same. And we lost all 3 games when he was out, and we ended up in the playoffs, and we lose to West Ham, who finished 18 points behind us. Anyway, never mind.
Anyway,
you can't tell
on
I
that
care
cheerful
about
note, it's time for our weekly Man v Fat football results, everybody. So Mark's been in touch. First of all, well done, Town, on a great win at Scoftus Road against Queen's Park Rangers. A few of this week's local results. Borussia Moobs and Backfat, 13. Bayern Munchies, 6. Old and Pathetic, 13. Aston Griller, 2. Borussia Munchen Flapjacks, 4. Crouch Potatoes, 6. Maradona Kebabs, 5. Inter Milan, 7. And L'Argentina 16, FC 20 Stone 4. The results from our local league: Pork Vale 4, Seattle Quarter Pounders 6, Man Titty, our favourites, 16. Butch.
Yes, get in there.
16 versus Far From Athletic 4. To lose a few pounds 11, LA Galaxy Bar 8. Their end of the scores so far for the Man v Fat results this week. I think they deserve a big round of applause. They are fantastic. And some things to mention as well. I've had a lot of mentions from people this week. And lots of people are complaining about our canary behind my head. It's dead, as you can clearly see. But they'd quite like it a little bit more deflated than it actually is at the moment, so we might have to work on that. And also, if you're going to the game on Saturday against Leeds United, we lost a Town fan this week. We lost young Mason Fountain. He was only 18. He's had a brain tumour and he's been fighting for a long, long time. Massive Town fan. And his mum Shelley, and lots of people are sharing this far and wide. On the 18th minute, in memory of Mason, if we could all give a big round of applause to Mason, because he was only 18, bless his little heart. And
I think
in his short life, he went through a hell of a lot.
He did. I think some years ago, our friend Beat managed a team in a charity game.
He did
to raise funds for Mason, and I played in it. Yes, so yes.
And also at Portman Road, the disabled supporters have been in touch. There's a disabled supporters Portman picnic. It's 3 till 5, Wednesday the 30th of August at Portman Road. Unlimited access to all the Ipswich Town inflatables for disabled supporters and those looking to celebrate the Foundation's disability provision. No booking necessary, so have a good time there. David, look, thank you. I knew we'd get into extra time. When's the book out?
I hope next year.
You'll come back?
I'd love to come back, yeah.
Excellent. Well, look,
and I must just give Sergei Beltacher a shout, because he was the other. I mean, he didn't do a great deal for this club, but he has done a great deal for Ukraine and a great deal for football. And
It's
I should have
Ukrainian
mentioned him
Independence Day,
earlier.
isn't it?
Sorry,
David, no, it's great.
Yeah.
David Sheepshanks, everybody. Thank you, David, very much. Next week, we'll be joined by former Town striker Alan Lee. Will be with us next week. To keep in touch, check out our Life's a Pitch socials on Facebook, Insta and Twitter, or X as it's called now. On YouTube, please subscribe and like the channel. It does help us with the funding and keeping us going. Thanks again to our main sponsors, DPS Tech. We're also supported by All About Hearing, marketing company Ginger Pickle, Forward Floors, Come Hither Design, the Hudson Group, Sound 4 Pro Audio. Thank you, Capacity Crowd. Don't forget, you can go back and watch. You can cheer yourselves. It's okay at that point. Thank you, Capacity Crowd. You can go back. You can go back and watch all of our previous episodes. Tell all your friends about Life's a Pitch TV, and I'll see you down at the ground for the match against Leeds at the weekend. Up the Town. Good night, everybody.